Get going. All right, welcome everybody. So we're gonna do heart healthy holiday foods, and I'm here today with Minden Winston, and we're gonna go ahead and get started by making a alternative holiday mash. So I don't know how many people are familiar with rutabagas. A lot of people aren't. So I'm gonna actually demonstrate how to cut a rutabaga because a lot of times when we're in the grocery stores, people kind of look at different produce and they're like, I don't know what that is. I don't know how to cut it. It can be kind of intimidating, and produce shouldn't be intimidating. It really should be fun. So this is a rutabaga. It's super high in so many different nutritional things, and I'm not going to go into all the details with that per se, but just know that we got one more person coming. All right, last one that's being let in, and then I'm done. All right, you guys, so we're going to make rutabaga mash. So I always like to cut off the top and the bottom. And if you can go ahead and mute yourself, perfect, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and cut the top and the bottom. So if you guys wanna look at the screen where I've got my hands here, I'm just gonna cut the top and the bottom off. And it does have a wax coating on it, so don't be disturbed if you see that. I rarely see it without a wax coating, unfortunately, but that just kind of helps preserve it, just like sometimes apples are the same way, they'll kind of put a wax coating on them. So I'm just gonna kind of go down the sides. I'm just going ahead and just skimming off that skin. And it does help to have a very sharp knife for this, you guys, because ultimately this is very hard. It's not soft, it's very firm. And I've already got some cut over here as well, but I want to show you guys how to do this on the side here. And another thing that would be great is to use if you were looking for an alternative mash would be celery root. Celery root is really good for our blood pressure. So eating celery root would be another great option instead of doing potatoes. And celery root's really knobby. It's a very ugly, very, very ugly vegetable. And you'll see it in the produce section. It's got like hair growing out of it and everything. It's not the prettiest, but it's so good for us. All right. So I've got my all peeled on the outside. I don't like to use a peeler on this because ultimately it's really, really tough, fibersome outside. So this is just gonna go, all the skins will go into the compost. And then I like to just go ahead and I'm gonna take my knife and I'm gonna go right down the center. I always like to keep my fingers away from it. I'm just gonna kind of rock it back and forth. And a lot of times it'll kind of just get stuck. So I'll just give it a nice tap and it will pop apart. If you're really nervous about cutting it, you can always take a towel and kind of put over your hand so you make sure that your hand's nice and safe, because we want everybody to have all their fingers still attached after cooking. So, all right. We're just gonna cut that into sections, just like you would a potato, but again, it's just a lot firmer than most produce is. It's more along the texture of like a carrot, maybe even harder than that. So we're just gonna go ahead and cut that into some cubes. And so that's how you would do that, and you'd repeat the same thing with the rest of this. But I do have some already cut up here, so I don't want to take all the time cutting. But we've got some already cut here in a container, and I have not cooked these yet. I added just some filtered water on top. You want to add just a little bit of salt, not a lot, as you cook it. That's always good because it absorbs it better, and you're going to have to use less salt. So I always like to add just a little bit at the beginning. And I think I mentioned to you guys last time, I like to use Celtic salt because it does have all the minerals. So it's not just the high sodium. It's got a lot of beneficial things to it. So we're going to take this and I'm going to put this over to the stove. All right. And this is where I was saying at the beginning, we're going to kind of do some different camera angles. So I'm just going to move this one camera here because we're going to come over to the stove top. All right, so we're going to be making a low-carb stuffing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get my pan nice and heated. And while that is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about the ingredients that are going into our non-bread, or we could do gluten-free bread if somebody needed that, but we're going to do low carb all around. So what I'm going to be using is I've taken some cauliflower here, and all I've done is broken it into little florets. And all I did for that was I just literally just took my hands and broke it up into smaller pieces. You could totally skip this step completely and just use cauliflower rice. I personally like the texture and to get a little bit more browning if you use the fresh. The cauliflower rice is a little bit more moist, and so you're not going to be able to get that like caramelization. I like my when I have my stuffing, my traditional stuffing, I like to have that browning, usually have that toasty bread, it kind of gets caramelized. And I want to kind of mimic that with the cauliflower today. So we're just breaking that up into pieces. And we all know that cauliflower is like really good for our health. It's really gained a lot of popularity in the last several years, pizza crust and cauliflower mashed potatoes. So this is just another way to like add to your cauliflower experiences, so to speak. So we're just going to take this over to the stove. I've got my pan heating up here. And while that is heating, I'm also going to be using some fresh herbs. I always like to infuse my oils with some herbs, and I'm going to go ahead and do that at the beginning before we add everything so that the oil's nice and fragrant. And so today I'm going to be going ahead, and I have some fresh sage. I also have some fresh thyme. And what's really nice is this time of year in the grocery store, you'll find what's called a poultry blend, and usually it's 4 turkeys. So we've got our pan heating up here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add some oil right to that pan. So it's been nice and heating up. We're just going to go ahead and we're going to get that going. I don't want the pan to be super hot because I don't want it to burn my herbs. So I'm just going to take a nice handful of both the sage and the thyme. So the thyme is the leafy one here. You can hear just a little bit of a sizzle. See, it's kind of popping a little bit. That's what we're wanting because it's super, super fragrant, and that's going to infuse into our oil really nicely. All right. And I'm going to add the sage next right into the pan. So we're going to give that a nice little stir. And we're just wanting to kind of infuse the oil because this is going to add a nice level of flavor to our stuffing. A lot of times when you're cooking with vegetables, you want to make sure that you have enough flavor going on. Because usually when you're cooking with like meat and stuff, you have that depth of flavor naturally. But when you're cooking with more vegetables, you want to make sure that you have that. So, all right. So it's getting nice and infused. And I don't necessarily want to leave it in there because I don't want it to burn. So I'm actually going to take the herbs out and I'm going to add them back in after the very end of cooking because I don't want the flavors to completely go away and I also don't want them to burn. So I'm just going to take them right out of the pan. And I'm just going to put them on my sheet pan over here that I have. All right, and I've got kind of the standard ingredients you'd expect. I've got some celery and some onions. I also have some carrots that I'm going to be adding to this as well. And I want to make sure that I'm adding all the traditional flavors that we'd expect when we have stuffing. I'm going to add the carrots right in there as well. Just give them a nice stir. All right. And I want them to get a little bit of color on them. And so you hear the nice sizzle, but I'm seeing that the pan is kind of dry. You guys look in the pan, you can see it's really dry. So I'm just going to add a little bit more oil to this. Not too much, just so it gets that nice caramelization going. So I'm going to actually turn up the burner so that it's getting a little bit more heat to it. And we're gonna let that cook. And while that's cooking, I wanted to take a moment to talk about garlic, because garlic is really good for us. I think most of us know that garlic is super healthy because it's really good because it's antibacterial. So it's great this time of year where we're worried about getting sick. It can also help us get well when we are sick. So what I like to do is I'll get fresh garlic and I'll break it up into the cloves, and then I'll pour warm or boiling water over top of it, and it makes it really, really easy to peel the garlic, as opposed to sitting there and trying to peel it and it just won't come off. So I just like to do it in the boiling water so it peels really nice and easily, just like so. And I always like to add garlic because, again, it's going to give you a nice depth of flavor as well, which we really are looking for. All right. So I've got my 3 cloves of garlic that are all peeled. I'm just going to give them a quick slice, and then I'm going to add them right to our onions and our celery here in a moment. But I don't want to add them too soon because the garlic will burn. I'm just going to give that a nice stir. And you'll notice I'm not adding any salt or seasonings yet, because right now I'm trying to get color. And if you add any water to your pan, then you're drawing out the moisture, and you're going to bring down the temperature of the pan by letting that come out. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the temperature up high so we get that caramelization. So, all right. So, we got that going. I'm going to give that a nice stir. And you might be asking, how do I know when to add the garlic? So you hear that nice sizzle in our pan right now. Ultimately, when that sizzle starts to go down, that means the carrots and the onions are all releasing their moisture, and that brings down the temperature of the pan, which means it's safe for me to put my garlic in there. So we're gonna wait a few more moments on that because I don't want it to burn, because burnt garlic is probably one of the worst things we can do. So we're just gonna give that a nice stir. All right. Only you guys were here, you guys would smell all these wonderful smells that are going on in here. All right. All right. All right. So I don't know if you guys noticed the change in the sizzle, but it did kind of go down a little bit. So now it's safe for my garlic to go in. I'm going to add my garlic. And this is also the point in time where I'm going to add my salt and pepper and seasoning. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my pepper mill. I'm going to get some black pepper in there. I'm also going to take some of my Celtic salt as well. Again, not a lot, just enough to kind of season our stuff. All right. And in addition to that, I'm also going to be adding some poultry seasoning to that. So this is going to have the thyme and the sage and all those spices that you think of when you think of the holidays. We're going to give that a nice stir. Alrighty. So we're going to give that a nice stir. So one of the things I do want to talk about is also the sage and the thyme. Those are also both really good antibiotics, natural antibiotics. So again, flu season, with everything going on, especially right now, you want to boost your immune system. The thyme and the sage is going to be able to help you with that. And the garlic. So the trifecta right there going on. So we've got that all kind of sweating down. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 3 cups of my cauliflower that I have. Like I said before, you don't necessarily have to do the full little florets like I'm doing here. You could use the cauliflower rice, and that would still give you a nice, very delicious stuffing. We're just going to give this a nice stir. And you'll see that my pan's getting a little bit dry in here. And that's okay because we're going to be adding some moisture here in just a moment. You can go ahead and you can add some vegetable stock or chicken stock at this point because we do need a little bit of moisture. If you think about how you would make traditional stuffing, there's always some sort of stock that you usually add to it. So just got this going. All right. And if I wanted the cauliflower to be super crispy, I could also give it a nice roast before I add it in here so it has some caramelization. All right. So I've got some chicken stock here that I'm going to be adding. And it's very dark because I made it myself, so it's very, very dark in color, which is okay. But I'm going to need to top it off with a little bit of water as well because it is so thick. So we're just going to let this go ahead and simmer. I'm going to give that a nice stir. Let that simmer. And you'll notice that, again, the temperature of the pan came down. So I'm going to turn the heat back up. And we're just going to pop a lid right on the top. All right. So that is going. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that to the back. Right now. I'm going to let that go. All right, you guys. So we've already got some mashed potatoes going. So we've got the rutabaga instead. We've also got some alternative stuffing going as well. So what else are we missing, you guys? What else could we possibly have? I kind of touched on it at the beginning. And it is cranberries. So just raise your hand if you like cranberries. Yeah? Anybody like cranberries? I know not everybody is a fan of this tart little fruit, but it is quite delicious. And I was telling people at the beginning, what's really wonderful about this fruit is it is shaped like a heart. So it actually floats to the surface. So I don't know how many people knew that, but it floats. And so if you cut it in half, you'll actually see that it has 4 little chambers, just like a heart. And cranberries are really good for our hearts as well. And so when I'm making cranberry sauce, I like to go ahead and I put them in a bowl with water. And whenever I go through the cranberries, I'm looking for the ones that are firm. The ones that are soft already, those are ones that have already started to spoil. So I like to have them in the water, and then I sort them out into my pot. So I just like to go through them, just make sure that there's none of them that are soft. And we're just going to go ahead and put those right into our pan. And I'm going to go even less traditional because it's not going to be like clumpy and it's not going to be a gelatin. I like mine a little bit more chunky. If you guys like your smooth, you can always take this recipe and you can put it in a blender or you can take an immersion blender, get it nice and smooth. But I like mine super chunky. So we've got our cranberries that have been sorted, all set to go. And I like to do a cranberry orange spice because cranberries and orange, they are just a beautiful combination. So I'm going to go ahead and I've already pre-squeezed some orange juice here. I'm going to add to that. But I also like to add some orange zest. Or in this case, I actually have clementine. So I'm just going to go ahead and zest that. This is going to give us a nice orange flavor. And a lot of the vitamins in oranges are actually in the skin. And so we want to get all that vitamin C we can this time of year, keep us nice and healthy. So I always like to do that. Give the zest. And if you didn't have oranges, you could also do lemons instead. That would also work really well. I just like the orange and the cranberry. All right. You always want to make sure you scrape off the side of it. And I was short just a little bit of juice, so we're going to squeeze the last of this so we don't have it go to waste. We're just squeezing some of the clementine right into our pot. And for this cranberry sauce, I'm also wanting to keep in mind to keep the sugar down because sugar causes inflammation, and inflammation is the cause of all the diseases we have, is inflammation in the body. So I want to make sure that I really keep that in mind. And the way I'm going to be doing that is I'm going to be using some alternative sugars today. And you have your choice. You could use a maple syrup, which is more natural. You could also use raw honey, would be another great alternative. And then we also have coconut sugar, which I think I talked about when we had our class before. The thing that's great about coconut sugar is if you're diabetic or you're having any issues, or anybody in general, the thing that's great about coconut sugar is it doesn't cause your blood sugar to spike, which is always a wonderful thing. So, because when our blood sugar is nice and level, we're nice and level. When it spikes, we have those highs and those lows, which we don't want. So, we're going to just add some of our coconut sugar right in here. And I'm going to actually do half coconut sugar and I'm going to do half maple syrup because I really like that flavor. So I'm just doing a half a cup of coconut sugar. And I will be sending out all these recipes just like I did last time. So nobody needs to take notes because I won't be giving measurements on everything. So, all right. So right now I've got the cranberries in there. I also have the orange juice. I have the coconut sugar and I have some maple syrup. In addition to that, because again, I told you guys I like it really chunky, I actually like to add dried cranberries to it as well. Because then it gets really nice and thick. So I'm going to add that right in there. All right. And then this is where the fun comes in. You can really customize this to your palate. So I really like to use cinnamon, a lot of cinnamon. So I'll do a whole cinnamon stick. And I will also add in some ground cinnamon too. And when it gets towards the end of cooking, I will also adjust the flavors because all cranberries are not created the same. So I might need to add a little bit more sweetness. I might need to add some more spices to it. It really just depends on the cranberries because they're all unique, just like us. And then I'm going to be adding some ginger. Ginger is great because it's great for fighting inflammation, which we don't want in our bodies. We're going to add some, and I have some fresh ginger here that I cut into slices. In years past, when I wasn't as concerned about the sugar level, I've also used candied ginger as well. In addition to that, I really like cloves. Cloves is another spice that's super antibacterial. Same thing with cinnamon. So all these foods that we're making today are really going to be giving us in our bodies what it needs to fight whatever comes our way this year. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on the burner back here, you guys. And we're going to give that a stir. Bring that all together. Give that a nice stir. So pretty. So pretty. And the other thing I like to do is I actually like to cook the orange with it, and I'll pull that out at the end of cooking because it just imparts some more flavor to it. And this always smells so good. All right, so we're gonna pull that off to the side. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna check on our rutabaga. So we're gonna go ahead and see how it's cooking. They do take a while to cook, just so you guys know. We'll go ahead and check them. They're still very firm, which is fine. So we're just gonna go ahead and put that back on the burner over here. Over here. So while that is cooking, does anybody have any questions? You want to drop them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself if you'd like. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. No questions? All right. Just thought I'd check in and see how you guys are doing.
I have a question. When you add the ginger to the cranberries, is it better to slice it, or is it better to like use a rasp and grate it in?
So I like to do it in chunks because not everybody in my family really loves ginger. If they don't know it's actually in there, it's easier. I just like to do the chunks and everything because I feel like that way, like you just, sometimes when you do it on the microplane, it can be a little bit stringy. And so I want it to be a little bit smoother than that. So I know I like it chunky, but I also don't want to have strings of ginger in there. So yeah, I just did them in nice little coin slices. So, all right. Does anybody else have any questions? All right. Okay. All right then. All right, we're gonna check on our stuffing that's going on in the back. All right. All right, so the stuffing is here in the back. We're just gonna give it a nice stir. But right now, the vegetables are kind of looking like that. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of look, give it a peek. It smells really, really good in here, you guys. I wish you were here. We're going to go ahead and put the top back on there. And you can kind of see that the cranberries are starting to get a little bit bubbly. So how many people have ever cooked fresh cranberries before? All right. So everybody knows that they pop. They like to come alive that's because of their chambers. So as they get hot, the chambers, the air in them kind of wants to shoot out. So they like to pop. So we'll see that here in a few moments. They're going to start to pop. All right. But it's going to be a couple minutes before they start to pop, which means we have time for our dessert, which I'm super excited to share with you guys today. So how many people like pumpkin pie? All right. How many people don't necessarily want all that carbs because we've already had rolls and everything else by that point? And you get to dessert and you're like, I want the pie, but I don't want to eat like just the center part. Yeah, that happens all the time. So there is a solution. And the solution is you do a crustless one, which is what we're going to be doing today. And we're going to go ahead and give that stir because I hear them starting to pop just a little bit. So what I have here is I have some coconut milk. So I'm going to be measuring out 1.5 cups of coconut milk. And you want to make sure that you are getting the coconut milk that does not necessarily have all of the extra unnecessary things in it. A lot of the coconut milk that you get in a can, they will have a lot of additives to thicken it, which we don't need for this recipe. So right now in the pan, I just have the coconut milk in here. And I'm going to be adding some pumpkin. So you could do fresh pumpkin, canned pumpkin. It's all super nutritious and good for us. And we know the carrots have a lot of wonderful things, and anything orange has those same characteristics. All right, I hear the cranberries. Let's check on them real quick. Give them a stir. All right. I'm going to pop the top on that guy too. So we're just going ahead. I'm just going to turn the cranberry sauce down a little bit. I don't want them popping all over the place. So we have our coconut milk, and we also have our pumpkin in there. And what would pumpkin pie be without all of its spices, right? So we need a lot of spices in here. So we're going to be using some dried ginger in here. And as you guys can notice, like I've had ginger in something else already. So I really love ginger. So I actually usually use a lot more ginger than most people do. So I'm going to be actually adding a full teaspoon of ground ginger in here. And if you wanted to use fresh, you could also use fresh. And in that case, I would go ahead and do it on the microplane so it's nice and fine. And we could always strain that out before we put it into our little cup, because we are going to be cooking this. So we are also going to be adding some lovely cinnamon. And cinnamon is a component of pumpkin spice. So if you had a pumpkin spice blend, you could also use that instead. I usually like to make my own pumpkin spice blend because I like it to be a little bit fresher and have a little bit more ginger. And we're also going to be adding some cloves to this as well. I'm just going to add some cloves. All right, we're going to come over to the stove for a minute and check out our cranberry sauce because it is starting to bubble a little bit. All right. And we're going to turn that down. All right, so it's starting to simmer. You can see that the cranberries themselves are starting to get very soft, and they're getting very delicious. All right. So we're going to let that simmer, and while that's simmering, we're going to take our pumpkin and our spices, and we're going to go ahead and give them a nice whisk together. So I'm just going to come over here so you guys can see. You guys see? All right, perfect. All right, so we're just mixing that all together. You can see it's becoming that beautiful orange color that we think of when we think of pumpkin pie. And the thing that's really nice about this recipe is that you don't have to worry about the carbs. It's also dairy free. There's also no eggs, so if you have any family members who are vegan, this is a great recipe to utilize. And the other thing I want to be adding to this, which a lot of people aren't familiar with, but if you have a pumpkin spice blend, you won't necessarily need to add this, but mace is a spice. It's very similar to nutmeg, but it's going to give the pie that nice pumpkin spice kind of flavor that you think of. But it's got that same kind of flavor. All right, so we've got our coconut milk, we have got our pumpkin, we got our spices. What could we be missing at this point, right? So the thing that we are missing, because, I just thought of something. This is not actually going to be vegan when it's all said and done. Because I am going to be using gelatin, although you could use agar or agar if you were looking for something for a vegan substitute. So I've got some gelatin here. I like to use gelatin because it's really great for rebuilding your gut, and I have a lot of gut issues. So I really do like to use gelatin and collagen as well, because I do find it does help me a lot. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to measure out 2 teaspoons. And there is a difference between gelatin and collagen, and I don't know if everybody knows quite what the difference is. When cooking, the thing that you need to know is gelatin will thicken. Collagen you can blend with like a liquid or whatever, and it's going to be just fine. But it won't thicken. So if you're trying to make anything that you want thickened, it won't happen if you use collagen, which is the important thing to take away from this. All right. And then the other thing I'm going to be adding is vanilla. And so I'm just going to add a little bit of vanilla extract to this as well. And we're going to go ahead and give that a nice whisk. All right. Wish you guys were here so I could share this all with you. All right, so we've got our cranberries. You can see they're starting to get nice and thick. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn down the heat on this. And I'm actually going to move this to the back burner. All right, because we're going to steal this front burner for our pumpkin pie. All right. So we're just going to cook this until it kind of thickens. Because with the gelatin, it's just like if you were making Jell-O at home. Like you always have that hot water that you mix with the gelatin, and then you have the cold. Kind of similar thing. We just want to make sure that we don't have any clumps, because what will happen is sometimes you'll get clumps with gelatin. And so I want to make sure that there's no clumps. Giving it a nice stir. And we've got it on medium heat right now. So, all right. Okay, so somebody asked if you could use cornstarch instead. Yes, you could use cornstarch instead. The texture is going to be different, though. I will say that. It's a little bit different. Gelatin's a little bit smoother. Cornstarch is a little bit, especially when you are doing something that's going to be chilled. Gelatin is the preferred. I wouldn't recommend using. Agar-agar would be the only other substitute that I would recommend. If this was something that was going to be served hot, if you were serving it hot as is after it comes off the stove, if you wanted to serve like a hot pudding, you could use cornstarch. Arrowroot would also be another option. Cornstarch, especially traditional cornstarch you'll find, is GMO, which usually has a lot of stuff that messes with our guts, and we already have enough issues on Thanksgiving that we don't necessarily want to be messing with our guts any more so than we want to. So, does anybody else have any questions? I just threw a ton of information at you. Just sitting back and absorbing.
Did you say you put some salt in there? What kind of salt were you using?
So I use Celtic salt. I use Celtic salt when I'm cooking. Celtic salt has a lot of minerals and things that traditionally we wouldn't get otherwise in our diet. I still try and be very cautious of how much salt, but I do find that for me, it has worked really, really well. And it does not, my mom has blood pressure issues and she uses Celtic salt and it doesn't cause her blood sugar to spike. Or not blood sugar, her blood pressure, sorry.
Where do you buy that?
What?
Where do you buy that?
I feel like most stores carry it now. I'm not sure where you guys are up in Evanston, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to say most Jewels carry it now. I want to say even Trader Joe might have it. But I know that you can easily find it online, but most stores carry it now. I know Whole Foods carries it as well. Would be another option. Most of the if you look in the salt section, there's usually next to some of the non-traditional salts, like salt substitutes, you'll find the Celtic salt. If not, I know you can buy it on Amazon because during the pandemic going on, I did end up ordering it off of Amazon at one point. So,
Okay, thanks.
all right. So our pumpkin pie is going ahead and it's gonna give a nice simmer and it's gonna cook. And we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go back and check our lovely rutabagas. So we give those a nice little check. All right, and they're still very, very hard. So you'll see that the rutabaga is still very, very hard. They take a while to cook. So they're cooking away. But what I'd like to talk about is the lovely stuffing that we made. Because I feel like it is probably pretty ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna bring that up to the front so you guys can see it because it is starting to be super delicious. All right. So we've got our lovely stuffing right here going on. And you guys can see it started to cook down. And we've got our cauliflower in there. And whenever I'm cooking, I always like to make sure that I'm tasting as I go. It's so important to make sure your seasoning is proper as you go. You don't want to over season, but you also don't want to under season. So I'm just going to give this a quick taste and see where we're at. So I'm actually tasting a liquid, just so you guys are aware. All right. So from tasting it, I do know that I'm going to need to add some more spices. And this is the great thing is you get to really adjust it to your palate. I love black pepper, so I know it needs more black pepper. I also want a little bit more of the poultry seasoning in there as well. I like my vegetables to be super flavorful, so I don't want them to be bland. And I'm also going to add a pinch more of that Celtic salt. I didn't want to add too much at the beginning. You can always build the flavor is the key here. All right. And I was trying to cook it down, and so I had the lid on there, but I'm now trying to get the water to evaporate. So I'm actually going to leave the lid off of it now. All right. I think our pumpkin pie filling is also done. So we're just looking for it to have a nice simmer. Just a little bit. Again, always tasting as we go. That way I can always adjust. So I'm kind of tasting the pumpkin pie filling. And because all pumpkins not as sweet or once more savory, I always like to check because it's not always the same. So I'm going to add a little bit more of our coconut sugar to this. And that's the thing that's nice about like tasting as you go. I can't stress that enough because like it's just not the same if you don't. All right. Alrighty. So we have our lovely pumpkin pie right here. And what's nice about this is it's gonna set up just like you would if you had like a normal pumpkin pie that usually has like a custard base. With this, we're gonna go ahead and I have some little ramekins here. So I just have some little containers that I'll pour these into. And what's gonna be really great about this is it's gonna be all set to go. You don't have to worry about it. we're just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna taste the pumpkin pie filling. I like to put it into a cup that has a spout on it, so that it's really easy to pour into my little containers. So I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna pour that right into the little containers. And this usually takes about 8 hours for it to set up in the refrigerator. So this is something, if you were serving it for Thanksgiving, you would want to go ahead and have this set up the day before, which means that you don't have to worry about it the day of, which is always a nice thing. All right, I think I saw somebody in the chat. Yes, that is true. Yes, having individual ones is a good idea with COVID going on right now, you guys. Yes, individual servings are key. All right. Yeah, I'm thinking about doing some actually mini little pies this year. Like you can do them in the little muffin pans. Those are always a great idea too, if you're looking for individual sizes. That is a great. Thank you for pointing that out. So yeah, those will go ahead and go into the refrigerator. They'll set up in 8 hours. You can give them a nice little sprinkle of either pumpkin spice or cinnamon when they come out. And then you could also do, if you're wanting to do a dairy-free whipped cream to go on top, all you would have to do is you would take the top of your coconut milk and whip it with a little bit of vanilla and some maple syrup, and you have a nice dairy-free topping to go on top of your little mini custard pumpkin little dessert. All right. Alrighty. So we've got our lovely stuffing that's still simmering down. And we have our little custards that are setting up. All right. And we are going to check on our lovely cranberry sauce. All right, so this is our cranberry sauce. It's already started to cook down. As you guys can see, it's getting nice and thick. Oh, that's delicious. All right. So at this point, again, I always like to test and see where everything's at. So I'm going to give my cranberry sauce a taste now and see if all the spices are where I want it. I also find with cranberries, because they are so tart, I like to go ahead and balance that out with some acid. So I might need to add some lemon juice. I might add just a little, I know it's going to sound strange, some apple cider vinegar. Actually kind of brings stuff together too. Yep. Yeah, my cranberries were super tart. So I'm actually going to need to add just a little bit more sweetener to it. So I'm going to add just a little bit, like a tablespoon of coconut sugar to it. And like I was saying, sometimes I add an acid to it. So in this case, I'm going to actually add some apple cider vinegar to this because that's going to help kind of bring all the flavors together. That's the other thing I think I spoke about last time we met, was that like sometimes all you need is not necessarily salt, it's acid that you're missing. So all right, so we're just going to add some apple cider vinegar to that, and that will bring it all nice together. And then the other thing was we were going to check the spices on it. So I wanted to make sure that my cinnamon and everything was where I wanted it. And like I said before, I love cinnamon, I love ginger, so it still needed more for me. I'm just going to add a little bit more to it. That gives it a nice stir. But you can see it's getting really nice and thick. Really nice and thick. And again, if you wanted this to be like a smooth, like cranberry sauce, like you would traditionally do, you could actually use a can and go ahead and pour this mixture after you blended it, and you'd still get that nice little like ridges that everybody loves, those ridges from the can, you'd still get that. So, all right. So the cranberry sauce is done. It's ready to go. So I would just go ahead and cool that down. That's another one of those things that I would do a day or two in before. to get all prepped up for Thanksgiving. Our stuffing is just simmering, but we're going to give it a taste again and see where we're at. And it's tasting very much like traditional stuffing. It has all those flavors, and after it cooks down and starts to dry out a little bit, we're also going to get that crunchy texture that we're wanting. And I would probably, once I cook this, because I'd have it set beforehand, I'd go ahead and I might put it in a pan and do it under the broil setting, so you get that nice caramelization like you would if it had been cooking with like the turkey. So, all right. And I had all those herbs and everything, so I'm going to add those back in. Give that a nice stir and let that just simmer. And if you're worried about the herbs, like picking them out or whatever, you could always put those in some cheesecloth after you had given them a nice little thing through the oil. You can put some in some cheesecloth, and then they're really easy to pull out. Alrighty. All right, our rutabaga is still very firm, you guys, but you would mash it just the same as you normally would. I really like to, instead of butter, I like to use olive oil when I'm doing rutabaga. It just really enhances the flavor of the rutabaga, just salt, pepper, and then the olive oil. And if you pick like a really good olive oil that's really fruity, that would go really nicely with the rutabaga. All right, you guys, I threw a lot of information. So does anybody have any other questions? Yes, John.
That was great, Chrissie. So how long would that take? How long would those rutabagas take to actually cook?
So the rutabagas, I started those at about 6:40. So they usually take about an hour. Yeah, I was hoping since I cut them a little bit smaller that they cook a little bit faster so I could mash them with you. But I think everybody knows how to mash stuff, right? Everybody's good on the mashing skills? Yeah. So, yeah, we have all those things going. So does anybody have any particular questions or it's the holidays that they're like, oh my goodness, how do I make this healthier? Now is your time.
What do you do for sweet potatoes?
Okay, so sweet potatoes are a fun one. I'm glad you asked about that. So sweet potatoes, I hated my whole childhood because the only way I'd ever had them was the marshmallows on top with all, and I was like, this is just too sweet. And I love sweet stuff, don't get me wrong, but it was just disgusting. So I'm not a fan of it. Are you a fan of it? Are you looking for something similar or something to replace it?
No, I don't like the marshmallows and all the sugary, goopy stuff, but
Okay.
just something
more
healthy.
So what I like to do instead of that is, because I love sweet potatoes, I will actually take either coconut milk or heavy whipping cream, and I will infuse that with a little bit of ginger, and then I will just bake the sweet potatoes, and I'll whip it with just a little bit of that ginger infused heavy whipping cream or coconut milk, and just a little salt and pepper, and it is so good. And I would have that any day compared to the marshmallow crap.
Okay, so if you just roast the sweet potatoes
whole, yep.
Yeah, whole, and so they caramelize, and then when you're mushing them or mashing them, add some fresh ginger. So and you don't have to add any dairy.
That is completely up to you. You can add butter. Butter's great in there too if you utilize butter. You could add that in there as well. Usually what I'll do is I'll take the coconut milk or the heavy whipping cream. I'll put it in a small pot. I'll slice the ginger like I did today for the cranberry sauce. And I'll just let that simmer a little bit, and then I'll turn it off and let it cool with it in there. And then when you're whipping the sweet potatoes, then you'll go ahead and just add a little bit in there to get that nice fluffy texture.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome. And if you're looking for another way to utilize that, I do on my Facebook page, I developed a recipe for a lady called Jessica's Natural Granola, and we did a kind of a topping with her granola on top, and it was super delicious. That's another great alternative to the marshmallow crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I really don't like it.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so. All right, does anybody else have any questions? I'm more than happy to help. Yeah, I know it's so bad that I'm over here cooking and I can't share all this food with you guys.
I mean, any suggestions like for green vegetables? There's that horrible green bean mushroom soup.
Yeah, so last year, this time of year, I hosted a seasonal cooking class. And my alternative is I do green beans, but you do a quick blanch on them in some salted water. And then I do caramelized onions. Like I'll put those in a pot and I'll slowly simmer those down. And I'll do red peppers and yellow peppers with it. And then the kicker is, and this is the one that gets everybody, is I'll slice shiitake mushrooms up really, really thin. And I'll toss those with a little bit of olive oil and just a little salt and pepper and roast them on a sheet pan. They get really, really crispy. And if you didn't know any better, you'd think it was like bacon, but it's not. And you put that on top of the green beans. And that's my substitute.
Oh, that's a good yes.
Yes.
So you just use the mushrooms with the olive oil and the salt and pepper.
Yeah. When I'm cooking, for the most part, I don't know if you guys have noticed, for the most part, my main ingredients are using like salt and pepper for the most part, and I'll add a few spices and herbs. But I really like to cook seasonally, and I want to have the vegetables kind of speak for themselves and not try and just cover them up, because a lot of people are just like, I don't want to taste the vegetable. I was like, but the vegetable's delicious. You should want to eat the vegetable. So, yeah. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.
Any suggestions to replace gravy to go over the meat?
So as far as gravy, like I feel like it is one of those things that's just like kind of got to suck it up for the day. But if you're looking for like a vegetarian alternative, chickpeas actually make a really great gravy. And they have chickpea flour. And so you can go ahead and you could do like you would a roux and everything with a little bit of butter or olive oil or whatever you're using, make a roux, and then with the chickpea flour. And then you add your vegetable stock to that. And if you're wanting like texture, you could always make some crunchy chickpeas to throw in there. Because I've done that for like biscuits and gravy for like a vegan option, and it's delicious.
Oh, that sounds good.
So yeah.
Yeah, to something you said before, Chrissy, about vinegar. I'm using vinegar more to get sweetness and things. Like I'll do a balsamic broccoli, where first I partially steam the broccoli and then break them up, put them on a cookie sheet, and sprinkle them with balsamic vinegar and put them in the oven a little bit.
Yeah.
I miss sugar, so I find the vinegar will take its place.
Yeah, the vinegar is great for that. Also, I don't know if you've tried the coconut sugar yet, Frank, but John Frank, it is a great alternative, and it doesn't cause any like health things, which I love. The other thing is, if you're looking for something that's like a liquid form, if you're looking to replace a liquid, coconut, they also have coconut nectar, which is really great too. Again, doesn't cause the blood sugar to spike. I have 3 family members who have diabetes, and so we're always trying to watch that. So, yeah.
That has a lower glycemic index than regular sugar?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So yeah, it's great for that kind of thing. So all right, guys, if nobody else has any questions, I want to thank you guys so much for coming. Last chance. Does anybody have any questions?
You're going to send us those recipes, right?
Yes, I will send the recipes, and I will go ahead and I'll include that green bean recipe as well in there, so you guys have that as well. So,
thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, that was the favorite from the seasonal cooking class the other year. So I will definitely share that with you. And then I'm also gonna drop here real quick in the chat. If you guys want to take just a moment and send me an email with a testimonial, I am doing some other classes this year, and you'll get a complimentary pass to attend the class. So I'm working on updating my website and stuff. So I'm looking for testimonials. So I always appreciate feedback or anything you guys want to learn. I'm here to help you guys. So, all right, you guys. I hope you guys all have a happy holidays, and maybe I'll see you guys in the new year.
Great.
Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You guys have a wonderful rest of the year.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, you guys have a good one. Take care. Bye.